Welcome to Simple Conversation with ASG.
Follow your new favorite podcast host with a link in the description.
So, tell me, who is Kerry Lutz?
Well, hey, I'm a 67-year-old recovering attorney. Raised three children who are adults and on their own and happy, myself. And been podcasting since right around the end of 2010. Became a full-time podcaster in June of 2011. And devoted myself towards educating people about the economy, about the way money works, and about the unsustainability of our current economic system.
So, for anyone that maybe doesn't understand, and also for me who hasn't heard the term before, what is a recovering attorney?
Well, it's kind of an endearing term. It means, hey, I was a lawyer and I've moved beyond it, had enough of it, and basically, hey, once a lawyer, always a lawyer, but basically have indulged in other endeavors.
Yeah, whenever I was reading up on you, I'd realised that finance and economics was a big thing into it. So I did kind of want to know how you kind of transitioned from law into it, or was it something that always ran side by side?
Well, I'd been into Austrian economics, which for those of you who aren't familiar with Austrian economics, the kingpin of it is this guy, Ludwig von Mises. And to sum it up, free market economics, when the government sticks its head in and strays from its basic functions, which is very simple: to protect against enemies within and without, to protect the integrity of the free markets, and to peaceably settle disputes among its inhabitants. Once it strays from that, then things rapidly go wrong. And I've seen it over and over again throughout history. Basically libertarianism thrown in. The government that governs best is that which governs least. But we do need a government for the purposes outlined, and probably for some other purposes that can't be accomplished by the free market. And so I was always interested in it from the time I was 20. I became a self-proclaimed libertarian, and really Milton Friedman's special, Milton and Rose Friedman, called Free to Choose, which really proved the efficacy of free markets throughout history and throughout the world, really made me a believer in it.
Did things like that push you to move away from a career in law, which you already had and was clearly building for a while?
Yeah, well, my law career had kind of run its course. I could have continued on doing other legal things, but I was always an entrepreneur at heart. So I wanted to really see if there was a market for what I wanted to do. And as it turned out, there was.
What was it like practicing and studying law in New York? Because from the news and from TV shows, it seems like it's a hot spot.
Well, it's like any profession. They say if you can make it in New York, the song says you can make it anywhere. And I definitely believe that to be true, for sure. But it was challenging. You're dealing with a lot of smart people and a lot of dumb people. And some of them are your adversaries in the law, and some of them are judges. And the system's corrupt, the system's inefficient. I think Winston Churchill said democracy is the worst system in the world except for all the others. And our American court system is really in trouble, and just got my fill of it, got tired of it, and said, I could do something else that's more meaningful to me and maybe more beneficial to other people.
Do you remember what the first feeling or thought was whenever you kind of opened your eyes to how corrupt that system was, working close to it?
Oh, well, I had known it since I was a kid. My family had a legal printing company, and I dealt with lawyers all the time since I was 16 years old. And, you know, it was just a realization that that really there's, entropy in systems, things get corrupt, and they get corrupted, and it's just the way of the world.
The big stereotype about people who do practice law or practice anything really in New York is they're very like the TV shows and the movies of glamorized. They're very big suits, fancy lifestyle. They need the best of everything, and then obviously they have some form of evil attached to them. Was that something that you kind of pick up on and made you kind of steer away from living in New York, even though you've kind of been there all your life?
Oh yeah, well, it's evil is kind of a relative term. Um, I think corruption is more apt. I don't know. Some of these people are definitely out to do evil, but I don't think most of them are. They're really trying to do the best they can within a corrupt system. And, you know, it's kind of like the Hippocratic Oath uh, that doctors take even to this day. And the first thing is do no evil. And, you know, I feel like most lawyers don't want to do evil. Um, but sometimes you get in a situation where you feel like I got to do some evil for a higher good. And that's when the slippery slope begins. And that's when you can really easily lose yourself in the whole thing.
Was there anything you done in specific to make sure that you didn't fall into that trap? Because I would imagine if you're around it quite a
Mm.
lot in the corporate world, it's quite easy to kind of see the side of it that would be alluring to people.
Well, I think the thing that I did was staying away from certain specialties that I felt lent themselves to corruption, to evil. Criminal law, being on the defense side can lead to evil because, you put even though your client did something wrong, your job is to get them to provide them the best defense. And that's like a conflict there. So you got to be true to yourself. And I couldn't do that. And the other was personal injury, where, your client gets a hangnail and you're suing as if he lost his arm for millions of dollars. I mean, we had that case in the US where some lady took McDonald's coffee and had it on her lap and it spilled and she got awful burns there. And she got like $3 million verdict from McDonald's. It's, you know, it just lends itself to it. So uh, really just staying away from the places where you're most likely to get corrupted. But to some extent, everybody's corrupt here. Uh, everybody is had a client that they didn't 100% believe in, but put him up on the stand and let him tell his story.
Is there some kind of mental gymnastic you have to do with yourself whenever you're representing a client like that, like you just mentioned? Because I can imagine it's quite hard to defend someone that you're not completely sure you would have the same opinions if you were on the other side.
Well, the lawyer's got to be prepared to argue both sides of an argument. And like in matrimonial, which is another form of law that I avoided, handling divorces, there's a saying, there's three sides to every story: his side, her side, and the truth. And one thing you realize in law is everybody's lying. All right. Everybody lies. I don't care what they're saying. And you just have to look at the recent trials in the United States where you, you put up a guy who's a convicted liar and he's your star witness. And and this guy's going to get you the guilty verdict you want. And the other one's a stripper and also a habitual pathological liar. And how could you, in good conscience, bring a case like that? So truth is always important. Unfortunately, legal system in the good old days used to be a search for truth. Now it's a search for victory.
Yeah, it does definitely seem like that. I seen such a funny conversation on Twitter recently that people were saying the legal system's almost becoming sports. You're not really rooting for the truth. You're rooting for the person that's going to have the biggest celebration at the end. And it's quite funny that I read it yesterday when I talked to a guy. I had a guy on the podcast on Monday that was talking about how he's kind of seen up close how corrupt it is as well, and everything he was saying related to it. And it's from someone on the outside looking in. Obviously, I'm in a different country, you don't realize it, but as people like yourself have mentioned these things, it's really easy to spot nowadays. It's almost like they're not trying to hide it.
Yeah, well, it's gotten that bad that they don't try to hide it anymore. But, the legal system is just a reflection of the country, right? So, country's corrupt, the legal system's going to be corrupt.
What was it like in law school? Because every time I've spoke to anybody that's gone to law school or started practicing law, they've always talked about how grueling the learning process is. And I can understand why, to be honest. You do have to retain a lot of knowledge. But whenever you were going through law school, was it ever kind of like the work to reward isn't as big as everyone thinks it is?
Um, like my purposes for going was joining the company, the family business, and we dealt with lawyers all day. So I felt like it would help me in my business and uh, you know, open up other opportunities, which it certainly did.
So, how did you balance working in law and being an entrepreneur? As you said, you've tried to be an entrepreneur pretty much your whole life. So, how did you balance that?
It's wasn't that hard really. Uh, you know, the thing is, when you go to law school, you learn a way of thought, you learn a way of dissecting arguments, of, you know, detecting lies to some extent. And I really felt like, you know, I had an advantage in business having having the legal, uh, all the legal experience behind me. It really, it really made a big difference to me.
So, when you did officially then leave the law and go on the entrepreneurial setting, did you still stay in New York, or was this when you moved?
I was always an entrepreneur. Grew up in the suburbs of New York, and I stayed there my entire life till 12 years ago when I finally had enough of the place. My kids were grown, in school, out of school, and I said, I'm moving to Florida. I don't want to be in this rat race anymore. And even though I lived in a really nice area, well outside of New York City, um, I just foresaw the unwinding and the collapse of the state and the system that it was built upon. And I just said, I don't want to be here for this. Uh, I want to, go someplace else for the rest of my life. I don't need to be in uh, in New York anymore.
So, when you first moved to Florida, was there anything straight away that stood out that was completely different to New York and kind of reaffirmed your decision to move away?
Well, the weather was bad. It was bad here, for sure, and never underestimate the effect that the weather can have on your attitude. You know, I mean, I never minded winter until I realized that I didn't have to live through winter. You know, once I realized I didn't have to live in winter anymore, then I said, I will never go back again. You know,
Yeah,
I'll never
it
go back.
it seems to be the big thing that a lot of people who maybe not just in New York, but they've lived out in a lot of other states in America. Whenever they have reached a certain point, they're like, "I'm moving," and now Florida seems to be that hotspot, and every one of them has said that just not seeing clouds on like just randomly throughout the year is like almost completely consistently change their mindset, and that's why it's become a hotspot. Have you noticed that Florida is starting to become a hotspot for people who are trying to move away from their hometowns or from places they thought the dream was sold?
Yeah, well, in the good old days, people came down to Florida to reinvent themselves. Plus, it was a lot cheaper to live here than in New York. Not so much anymore. But now with the internet, you can never really truly reinvent yourself unless you're a social media ghost, right? You just can't, you know. Then some people, think they're going to come here and uh, and just reinvent themselves, and not quite so easy.
Right, so we'll move on to what you're doing now, which is the Financial Survival Network. How did that come about? Where did the idea come from? Or was it something you always kind of planned that somewhere down the line you were going to start?
Well, I always kind of had a hankering to be in radio. And, I thought, well, I'm not going to become a DJ. It's too difficult to do. I'll just, one day I'll buy a radio station. But then podcasting came about. Excuse me. And when podcasting came about, I said, hey, I can actually have a radio station without any of the nonsense. I don't need to do that. And that's what really got me into it, is that you got all the benefits of having a radio station without having to have a radio station.
Yeah, you can almost make the admin and the managerial decisions yourself and choose how it's perceived.
Yeah, really you can. It's amazing. So, and back then, back in 2011, there weren't that many people doing podcasts, there's relatively few. Now there's millions. Anybody with a microphone and a computer thinks that they can do a podcast, but it's not that easy.
What was it like when podcast was just kind of coming around, whenever it was the transition away from radio, and there wasn't as many as there is now?
Yeah, well, it was kind of the Wild West. You could say or do anything. There was no censorship. There was no, really, like, it was just so much easier. I mean, it was from a technical standpoint. You didn't have things like Spotify, recording studio, and all these apps. So you kind of had to do it on your own. But it was fun. It was exciting. It was scary because you didn't know if you were going to succeed or not. And it really, it was exciting. You felt like you were on the brink of really of something really unique and special.
So looking back now, 6,000 episodes later, and as we were talking about before I started recording the podcast, that you think you're probably in 10,000 episodes in total. What is there? There must be something along the way. You must have seen everything by now with the amount of guests that you've had in that time and the amount of times you press record. Is that there must have been something during that time where you just look back and thought, like, I don't actually understand what just happened. Something that just completely stopped you in your step.
It's kind of interesting. You just, I've met every kind of person you can imagine. Some people smarter than me, a lot of people smarter than me, some not so smart. And it just kind of amazes me. Like, everybody, it's been democratized, the media. Like, everybody can join in now. And I consider myself to be moderately successful, but, your success is unlimited, your potential for success, but you've got to learn the basic communication skills, and you have to understand emotional impacts of your words, of your actions, all these things. So yeah, I've learned a lot from it, about people, about places, and about the way the world works.
Yeah, your show is it's very specific to a topic, so I'm sure you've encountered people like this because I've encountered them, and I don't really have a set topic on my podcast, but you're bound to run into them as people that think they're a lot smarter than they actually are.
We all fall prey to believing we're a legend in our own minds, you know? Everybody, I don't care who it is, at some point, your ego takes over and you really, you know, you need a certain amount of self-awareness and to be able to get a wake-up call when it happens. You need to really have that reality check periodically, like, hey, I'm good, but I am not so great,
Yeah.
I could be better. And it happens regularly. It just happens with everyone. It's just human nature. You get good at something and you get really good at it, and then you know you get you start to think that you're better, and then life has a way of slapping you down and bringing you back to life, bringing you back to reality, right? We've all had it.
Is there anything specific you do if you've got a guest that you can kind of sense their ego's coming out a little bit too much, just to kind of bring them back to reality or rein control again of the episode?
I don't really like to be the the person that's going to change anybody. I have enough problems changing myself, and I really, you know, if someone asks me a question, I'll give them an honest answer. But it's like, hey, you do you, I'll do me, and I'm on to the next. It's not my role to try to fix people and change them unsolicited, because you know when you I can be wrong. I can always be wrong, and it might be my emotions that are making me feel a certain way, and the person really is totally not like that. Or it could just be a bad time for the person or whatever. You never know. I once saw on a newscast, the guy said, everybody has their own struggle that they are going through in life. So always be nice. And that's my thing. I can basically get along with anybody.
As you've done so many episodes and you've grown I'm gonna say your platform to such a degree, is there anything now looking back that you've learned that maybe at the beginning you would have never thought would change how your platform grew, or how you kind of created what you have now?
Well, what I've learned, and I always knew, is like the more outrageous people are, you know, outrageous, controversy, all these things uh, breeds interest and views and all that stuff, right? But it's just because you can get the views doing, clickbait and whatever, doesn't mean you should. And really be true to yourself. All right. Don't become a ratings prostitute. Which you see it on television, all the time, right? These people are like so full of themselves, and they know how to manipulate and turn the phrase and get people believing stuff that might not be true. So you have to seek your own higher truth and be true to yourself. Love what you do. The old cliche, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. That's not 100% true, but I'd say it's 75% true. Sometimes you could love what you do and just have a lousy day and you struggle through it. So love what you do and be true to yourself, and always try to be the best that you can, right? If you're done the best that you can, then you can never really be upset with yourself for letting yourself down or letting others down.
What was it about podcasting that made your decision to start your own? Because as you mentioned, when you started, they weren't really, they were kind of there, but they weren't under the media spotlight as much. So what was it that drew you to the whole podcasting world?
Well, it's like if you ever watched that show Top Gear when Jeremy Clarkson was there, and you knew something was going to happen when the guy goes, "How hard can it be?" And I said, "What? Listen to these other podcasts; they're great." I said, "How hard can it be to do your own podcast?" And really, the reality was it wasn't that hard, but it was in the initial stages difficult to learn. I was always technical background, a lot of computer work in my life. I've been behind a screen for the past 40 plus years, but learning how to actually create content, post it, edit it, all of that stuff, that was, for the first month challenging. And then we got there, and boom, it was like, hey, it was hard, but once you get the workflow down, it's easy.
Did it happen kind of suddenly that you realized I have a genuine future in this industry, or was it slowly over time you started seeing your audience build?
No, I just treated it as a business from the get-go. Rob Walsh, who's the VP over at uh, Libsyn, which to me is the best podcast server out there, he said, treat your podcast as a business from the day you start it. And that's what I did. And, I'd been successful in business before, and I knew I was going to be successful here. It was more challenging because, you know, uh, there's a difference between building an audience and being able to monetize. So over time, I learned how to monetize.
Yeah, you actually wrote a book on monetizing. What
Yeah.
drew you to do that? Was it just the fact that you realized a lot of people don't actually know how to monetize the platform?
Yeah, like a lot of people had good podcasts and had no clue on how you make money at this thing. And then other people knew about how to make money, but they had a lousy podcast. So I try to bridge the creative and the business aspects of podcasting together to give you a direction, a roadmap for success. That was 5, 6 years ago. Business changed a lot. How you get eyeballs, how you get views, clicks, all that has changed, but certain things are immutable. And my mentor is this lady, Valerie Geller, who's a radio consultant, uh, and she's worked with talk radio people from around the world, all over the world, like Asia, in Europe, South America, and she really, had her list of which you had to follow it to be successful. Never be boring. Always start with your best material. Put your best foot forward, and always talk to the audience as an individual, not as we or us or whatever. Personalize it. So a lot of those things I quoted in my book, and then I went into the business aspects, little things like making a business plan, which virtually no podcaster I ever met actually did that, other than the pros. None of them did it.
Do you think it's something that aspiring podcasters or people that have some kind of platform should be looking to do? They should be trying to create a business from the platform they've created or created.
Absolutely. If you're look, here's the simple matter. How much is your time worth? How much are you spending on your podcast? All right. If your time's worth $100 an hour and you're going to spend 100 hours or 1,000 hours a year, then you should be making $100,000. All right. If you're just doing it as a hobby and you couldn't care less, that's all well and good, but then it's a hobby. But if you expect to monetize it, then you got to put a value on your time, because you're putting your time in there. Like I probably spend thousands of dollars a month on various subscriptions I need, like YouTube subscriptions, Libsyn, you know, dozens of different subscriptions, having a mail list manager. Everybody, no matter how serious or unserious you take your podcast, you need to have a mail list manager, because the list could be one day be your key to financial fortune, or could be the key to your financial future.
Yeah, you've put me in nicely to the next topic I kind of want to talk about in terms of finances, because I'm doing so much research on you, and the keyword I keep typing in is financial because I'm looking up your podcast. I'm now stumbling upon the finance side of social media, and I've started jotting down some things because some of them are ludicrous. And the big thing that everyone seems to be talking about is investing, and specifically in, I don't know if this is the correct term, crypto coins.
Oh, cryptos. Yeah, well, it's like, I've been in on it for a long time. I haven't made any fortunes at it. I needed to buy it at $1 and sell it at 20,000. Then everything would have been great. But I didn't see the future of it then. I'm not sure I see the future now. I do invest in crypto. I buy some every week, and I'm well ahead for the year. But there's a lot of scams out there. There's not many cryptos that I would really get involved in.
Yeah, I did follow a few debates, people trying to kind of conspire if crypto was a scam or not. But obviously, I'm quite a rookie in this game, but it was just kind of from the outside looking in and kind of a fresh pair of eyes on it. Do you think that social media is playing a big impact on the way crypto is at the minute? And if you kind of eliminated social media from it, it would have really negative effects.
Yeah, it would have never gotten where it is now without the social media. I don't know that they're negative, but you have this term called FOMO, fear of missing out, right?
Yes.
And, a lot of you out there encounter this. And really, it's, it's kind of entertaining to see, but it's a part of the world now that we live in, and we've got to accept that this is it.
I can see, to be fair, why it's quite easy to get FOMO in this situation, because the videos or the articles about it are getting insane views. Is there anything specific you could think of that would help kind of reject that feeling of FOMO when you see the glamour it's got behind it?
You always look. I'm an attorney, so I'm an automatic skeptic. Okay. You got to show me something before I accept it as true. And that, like in crypto, that worked to my detriment, because I didn't get into it when I knew about it and really thought about doing it. I just thought, I don't know, it just don't seem right to me. But now, now I'm a little older, and I don't know if wiser is the right term, but hey, it's really it's important to stay open to social media, and ideas, new techniques, new ways of doing things, all of that. It's really important, because you have a closed mind. Closed minds are unprofitable minds, and they really do wind up limiting your potential and your success. So you always have to be open to new things.
The big forefront of finance, social media, the minute is real estate is the only way to be financially free. Do you think that's true, or is it just kind of bullshit the social media is feeding?
No. They say, when is a good time to buy real estate? When is not a good time? That I don't necessarily buy, but I do see it as real estate. Knowing what I know now about finance and about success and everything else, um, and leverage the ability to take other people's money uh, is really it has and tax advantages, especially in the uh, uh, in the United States. Um, it really is for an ordinary bloke. It is the best way to build wealth and accumulate wealth. Some of my biggest hits, my biggest scores in life have come from real estate. And, we're talking large things in selling houses. And I've only had a couple of losses in real estate, and they were relatively minor compared to the amounts that I've made.
So, is there any advice you could give to the average normal working person who's trying to not fully move into real estate, but trying to break in slowly?
Okay, so it's a simple matter here. I mean, it really is this simple. So if you can afford your credit, always keep your credit good. No matter what happens in your life, never let your credit go down the toilet. That's first and foremost. Okay. The next thing is if you're going to buy a house, all right, if you're in a position you can afford to buy a house, then buy a house that has, we call them duplexes here in the States, or quadplexes, quads, 4-family. In the Northeast, we call them like 2-family homes and 4 families. Elsewhere, they call them duplexes, triplexes, and quads. All right. So always buy, if you're going to buy a home and you're just starting out, buy a duplex or a triplex or a quadplex. So basically you can live for free, live rent free, put that money into buying more properties. That's the best way to start out, for sure. Airbnb is something that didn't exist when I was around, and I highly recommend that because it really enables you to build income and really turn your real estate into an operating business. So we like that a lot, and then just be on the lookout for opportunities.
Before we go any further into this, you mentioned not letting credit go down the toilet, and I think that's something that maybe is uncovered quite a lot in today's society. Is there anything? Can you give a list of things that will make your credit plummet?
Plummet? Yeah, like not paying off your credit cards every month. All right, drawing credit on your credit cards. That will cut it. I'm talking in the US, but I think this is probably pretty much universal.
Yeah.
And so that's one thing. And just being reckless with your credit, late payments, defaults, all of these things are really the enemy of good credit. Okay. And anybody, believe me, I've helped people as an attorney. I've helped many of you out there build their credit. And just like you can wreck your credit, you can really improve your credit with very simple measures. Very simple measures. Get the credit when your credit is good, and don't, use the minimally and very, shall we say, very sparingly where possible.
Okay, so we've talked about kind of that entry point, but there's something that you mentioned that has perked an idea in my head, which I've definitely seen recently, and I've noticed from talking to people in person about, is the word debt kind of shakes through people quite a lot because they assume, bailiffs are coming to your door or loan sharks are going to take your house away from you. How can you give just like the idiot's guide to using leverage or using,
All
not,
right.
I wouldn't say loans or debt, but using them to your advantage?
This is easy. Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. He spells it out the best of anyone ever. And I've read a lot of financial books, like hundreds and hundreds of them. All right. There's good debt, there's bad debt. All right. Bad debt is debt that doesn't earn you a return. So you buy a flat screen TV and you go into debt for that, although they're so cheap now you shouldn't have to, but just as a dumb thing. Or you buy a much fancier car than you really need and you have to pay that off over time. That's bad debt. Good debt is when you buy an asset like real estate or like any other kind of asset that you can rent out or whatever that will bring cash flow, all right, that pays the debt and earns you a return, all right? And if you can borrow 10 to 1, so for every dollar you invest, you put 10 in debt, or 9, then and you're actually able to pay it off, that's good debt. But it's not always good. It has to be a situation where the risks are calculated, okay, and are manageable.
So aside from real estate, is there anything you think people could make progress towards or kind of dip their foot into a certain industry that would help them not, I wouldn't say survive, but maybe push above the average person in today's current climate?
Hey, you learn money and you learn its uses and the risks. You're going to be way ahead of anybody else out there. 90% of people don't understand. They're debt slaves and slaves to their emotions. Control your emotions, really important in every business situation. Times when I haven't controlled my emotions, times when things didn't always work out the best for me. So in other fields, like, hey, one thing you can invest in always is yourself. All right, whether it's courses, there's so many things you can do on the internet now for little or no cost to improve your human capital that will always pay off a return. One thing also that I did in my younger years, I don't really know so much if it's true now, but basically every time I upgraded my technology, it always made me money. All right. So if you can create content or whatever, and you need to borrow $10,000 to upgrade your system, but it'll enable you to be 2 or 3 times more productive, then it's a no-brainer, right? Because you're earning an immediate return on that upgrade. So I always believe in having the latest technology, but not too, I want to be on the cutting edge, not the bleeding edge of technology. So always up your technical skills, always up your knowledge of technology. That is a guaranteed payoff.
You mentioned potentially being on the bleeding end of technology. How do you know when you're venturing towards that end?
You find out pretty quick. You, you'll know. You're in over your head. Like Windows XP came out. This is how long ago it was. And I got like a gamer computer. I got the hottest computer ever. And that thing just crashed nonstop. And I put up with it for 6 months. Then I just threw that thing in the garbage and I switched to Mac. But that was my own fault, because I didn't do my due diligence. You always got to do your due diligence.
Yeah, I agree there because I recently switched to Mac and I can't believe why I ever was on Windows to begin with. Like
I
everything is just so much
love
smoother.
it. I love it. Well, look, but honestly, a PC can do anything a Mac can do, right? There's no question anything, any application. There are certain apps for security reasons that you won't find on a Mac. You'll only find them on a PC. So that could be limiting for depending upon your industry. But you could do everything. But the Mac, in so many respects, does it so much better, right?
Yeah, completely agree.
That everything works together because you don't have a million configurations of a Mac. You have like 20 or 30 configurations over the past 5 or 6 years that the software is going to work with. So they don't have 800 different graphics cards, different RAM, different stuff that you just don't have to deal with a Mac. But as they get simpler and those little mini PCs proliferate, I think it's pretty well catching up. But the software in the Mac is much more, you have much less conflicts with it than you do with PCs. But it's much better than it ever was.
Yeah, I love having conversations with people like you who are like kind of experts in your industry, because like information like that I'm getting already from you and I'm jotting down notes, like I wouldn't get by just searching through Google because it would take too long to find answers. But something that I was brought up to me on one of the podcasts I recorded a few weeks ago, but it never made the episode, was, do you think money management or just kind of some form of financial literacy should be a school subject?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, interestingly enough, my 3 children, my daughters never had it in their school, but then my son got it. And honestly, he's the best money manager of the 3. And really, like, I learned it from my parents, but they made a lot of mistakes. And I continue to make major mistakes that had I been properly educated. Look, I knew how to open a bank account. They showed me that. I know how to do a credit card, and I figured out the rest. The legal background helped, like figuring out how to get a mortgage and other things. But like the concept of real estate being like the key way to wealth, I wish they had taught that in school. I had the opportunities in real estate over the years that I didn't take, and that was my mistake. But I really believe that financial literacy education is so important, and you can get it now on the internet much easier than you could ever get it before. Even like I use a program for my bank accounts called Quicken. That's a form of financial literacy there, because I can check every single account that I have every single day and monitor my transactions and make sure, everything is proper. And I know every day how much money I have in the bank. That's financial literacy. But, I didn't get a course. I got a program that does it. And, and then, just everything that's out there makes it so much easier to be financially literate now. It's better. The school teaches at least the basics, and then you can pick up the rest online very easily.
It's very clear in today that people they just kind of stop learning once they leave school, and it definitely is going to take a hit on them financially. Do you think there's anything in specific that's making people not research financial literacy? Because money's obviously always going to be a massive problem in the world for people. What is it, do you think, it stops them finding answers?
That's called laziness, intellectual laziness, right? Hey, it's like I like to party as much as the next person, but I'm always learning. Even at 67 here, I'm learning Spanish now, all right? Because I wanted to learn it. It's like there's no excuses for ignorance or for intellectual laziness. And that's a big part of the problem in our world today. It's easier to identify with groups, political parties, whatever, than it is to do your own due diligence and arrive at your own conclusions. right? So I go with them because they're better looking, or I go with them because they have more money. But that's not really going to get you what where you need to be.
So if you could give some advice to maybe someone that's listening to this that does want to expand their financial education, or they want to just kind of start learning how to take better care of their money, where do you think the best starting point would be?
I would go get that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, for sure. For sure. And hey, I would be open, depending on your geographical location and your opportunities, to move to better places, right? Just because you live someplace by accident of birth doesn't mean you should stay there, and doesn't mean that that's the best place for you to be.
Is there any places in specific you're thinking that would maybe benefit someone financially more?
Well, the US historically was the place to go. I'm not sure of that now. Still, there's opportunities here, but how long that lasts, I don't know. Uh, I think Europe is kind of like sclerotic and kind of you know not the best place for entrepreneurs. Uh, Maybe some places in Southeast Asia, but they often have property restrictions on foreigners. Um, not sure of that, but I do think if you're motivated, you want to improve, and you want to be the best you can, you could probably do that any place, but some places are easier. You know, when you go to places where there's a lot of lazy people, uh, you have an advantage, you know? So, but there has to be opportunities there. Like if it takes you more than 15 minutes to set up a corporation in any particular place you're at, that's not the place to be. In Florida here, I can set up a company online legally in 15 minutes or less for about $150. So let that be your gauge. Places like Estonia, the Baltic Republic seem to have like real opportunities there in Eastern Europe, but Western Europe seems to be like kind of very set in its ways and a lot of limitations.
Jerry, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I've got just a book full of notes here from things I've learned and I've just jotted down. So it's been a pleasure on my end as well. And I know for sure in the future, whenever financial situation gets better or worse in both our countries, I'm sure we'll be able to link up again and talk further.
I hope so. And hey, I really appreciate you having me on. And I had no idea where this was going to go, but I like where it went. And don't hesitate to call again.
Problem at all. Thank you very much, Kerry. Have a great day.
All right. Done.